Ramona, just sitting here. I was thinking today that I just love this book so much, and I was thinking when I read it when I was little and how much I liked it. Well, not little, but I was probably in middle school, and I just thought Ramona was hilarious, and so I went through all of her books. And even like now we have epic books, you might be able to get on there and get, you know, Ramona and her sister, Ramona and her mother, Ramona and her father. If it's a book that you're enjoying, it's one that you also can read at home. So anyway, yesterday, if you remember, we were talking about Ramona and the hard-boiled egg. Remember the hard-boiled egg she had? And she discovered at lunchtime that her mother had grabbed the wrong egg off the shelf and sent her to school with a regular egg. So when she cracked it against her head, which I could totally picture yesterday, I wonder if any of you tried that at home yesterday. She ended up with a soggy, real egg dripping down her face. So that was just a little bit crazy. So anyway, we're going to go right back, warm up our brains, read just a little bit of yesterday's chapter to remind ourselves what we were talking about. And then we go, usually when you read it, you go, oh yeah, I remember what we were reading about. And then when you take off, your brain's all warmed up, ready to go. It already is thinking about a little bit of what happened yesterday and just ready to take off. Okay? So here's yesterday. Ramona decided right there and then that she would never again write a cursive Q. Oh yeah, remember she was writing her name in cursive, which is a super fun thing to learn how to do. She would write the rest of her name, Quimby, in cursive, but she would always, no matter what Mrs. Whaley said, print her capital Q's. So there, Mrs. Whaley, thought Ramona, you can't make me write a cursive Q if I don't want to. And she began to feel like a real person again. And remember yesterday, Yard Ape was kind of friendly to her, and we learned his name was Danny. And he was kind of friendly to her. She decided she thinks she might like Yard Ape a little bit. So I can't wait to see what happens with that. The Quimbys quarrel. And a quarrel, remember, is like a little argument, just like kind of arguing. So you might have had a quarrel with your brother or sister, like a little fight or argument. But Ramona, said Mrs. Quimby on Saturday, I've already told you I boiled several eggs, so I would have a boiled egg for you every day. I put the boiled eggs on one shelf in the refrigerator, and I put the raw eggs in the other. In my hurry, I must have taken an egg from the wrong shelf. I'm sorry, there's nothing more I can say. Ramona remained silent. She felt mean and unhappy because she wanted to forgive her mother, but something in that dark, deep down place inside her would not let her. Hearing her teacher call her a show-off and a nuisance hurt so much that she could not stop being angry at almost everyone. Mrs. Quimby sighed in a tired sort of way. She gathered up the sheets and towels to feed into the washing machine in the basement. Ramona stared out the window and wished the misty rain, which fell softly and endlessly, would go away so she could go outdoors and roller skate away her bad feelings. Beezus was no help. She spent the night at Mary Jane's house with several other girls, and they'd stayed up late watching a horror movie on television and eating popcorn. Afterward, they stayed awake talking, too scared to go to sleep. That morning, Beezus had come home tired and grouchy and had fallen asleep almost immediately. I don't know about you, but I'm having some connections pop up in my head of slumber parties. Have you ever gone to one where you stay up too late and then the next day you are so tired, you're like, oh my gosh, what do we stay up so late for? But usually it's fun. Ramona wandered into the house looking for something to do when she discovered her father sitting on the couch, pencil in hand, drawing pad on his knee, frowning at his bare foot. Daddy, what are you doing that for? Ramona wanted to know. Oh, that's what I keep asking myself, her father answered as he wiggled his toes. I have to draw a picture of my foot for art class. Because remember, he's going to school to be an art teacher. I wish we got to do things like that in my school, said Ramona. She found a pencil and a paper, pulled off one of her shoes and socks, and climbed on the couch beside her father. Both steadied their feet and began to sketch. Ramona soon found that drawing a foot was more difficult than she expected. Like her father, she stared, frowned, drew, erased, stared, frowned, and drew. For a little while, she forgot that she was cross. She was enjoying herself. There, said Ramona at last. She had drawn a good, not an excellent foot. She looked over at her father's paper, She was a little disappointed in what she saw. It was the kind of picture a teacher might pin way off in the corner, but where no one but the artist would notice it. Her father's foot looked like a flipper. For the first time, Ramona began to doubt that her father was the best artist in the world. This thought made her feel even sadder, in addition to reminding her that she was cross at the world. Mr. Quimby studied Ramona's picture. "That's not bad," he said. "Not bad at all." "My foot's easier to draw," Ramona said. She felt like she should apologize for her drawing being better than her grown-up father's. "My foot is just sort of neater," she explained. "Your foot's kind of bony and your toes are hairy, and that makes your foot a little harder to draw." Mr. Quimby crumpled his drawing and threw it in the fireplace. "You make me sound like Bigfoot," he said, with a rueful laugh, and then he threw a cushion at Ramona. The day dragged on. By dinner time, Ramona still had not been able to forgive her mother, who looked even more tired. Mr. Quimby had crumpled up several more unsatisfactory drawings of his foot. Beezus had emerged from her room, sleepy-eyed and half awake, when her mother called the family to supper. "I wish we could have cornbread again," Ramona said, not because she particularly liked cornbread, because she felt so cross she wanted to complain about something. Cornbread was a pretty shade of yellow, which would have looked cheerful on a misty day. She leaned forward to sniff the plate of food in front of her. "Ramona," even though her father did not speak the words, his voice said, "we do not sniff our food in this house." Ramona sat up. Broccoli, baked potato, both easy to eat. Pot roast. Ramona leaned closer to examine her meat. She could not find one bit of fat, and there was only a bit of gravy poured over her serving. Good. Ramona refused to eat even the tiniest bit of fat. She did not like the slippery, squishy feeling in her mouth. And I don't know about you, but I am that way too. And I was just like Ramona. If my mom put pot roast or meat, I would always look for any fatty parts on the meat too and then pull them off to the side. "Oh, this is delicious," remarked Mr. Quimby, who did not feel he had to inspect his food before eating. "Oh, nice and tender," said Beezus, beginning to cheer up after a hard night. Ramona seized her fork, speared her meat on her plate, and began to saw with her knife. "Ramona, try to hold your fork properly," said her father. "Don't grip it with your fist. A fork is not a dagger." Ugh. With a small sigh, Ramona changed the hold on her fork. Grown-ups never remembered the difficulty of cutting meat when your elbows were far below the tabletop. She succeeded in cutting a bite of meat the way her parents thought was proper. It was unusually tender and not the least bit stringy like some pot roast her mother had prepared. It tasted really good, too. "Yummy," said Ramona, forgetting her anger. The family ate in contented silence until Beezus pushed aside the gravy with the side of her fork. Gravy was fattening, and although Beezus was very slender, even skinny, she wasn't taking any chances. "Mother!" Beezus's voice was accusing. "This meat has a rough surface on it." "It does," said Mrs. Quimby innocently. Ramona understood, but her mother was trying to hide something. She saw her parents exchange a little look between them. She too scraped aside her gravy. Beezus was right. One edge of her meat was covered with tiny bumps. "Oh, this meat is tongue!" Beezus pushed her serving aside with her fork. "I don't like tongue." And believe it or not, my family never had tongue, but you can even eat an animal's tongue, all the parts of them. So this is what the Quimby family is having. Ramona pushed the meat aside. "Yuck," she said. "Girls, stop being silly." Mr. Quimby's voice was sharp. "What do you mean you don't like tongue?" demanded Mr. Quimby. "You were just eating it and enjoying it." "But I didn't know it was tongue then," said Beezus. "I hate tongue." "Me too," said Ramona. "All those yucky little bumps. Why can't we just have plain meat?" Mrs. Quimby was losing her patience. "Because this is cheaper. That's why. It's cheaper and it's nutritious." "You know what I think," said Mr. Quimby. "I think this whole thing is a lot of nonsense. You liked tongue when you didn't know it was tongue, so there's no reason that you can't eat it now." "Yes, this whole thing is ridiculous," said Mrs. Quimby. "Tongue is disgusting," said Beezus. Picky can have mine." "Mine too," echoed Ramona, knowing she should eat what was set before her, but tongue? Her parents were asking too much. Well, the meal continued in silence. The girls felt guilty but defiant, and their parents were unrelenting. When Mr. Quimby finished his serving of tongue, he helped helped himself from Ramona's plate. Picky was purring like a rusty motor, walked into the room and rubbed against the legs to remind the family that he should be eating too. I wonder, said Mrs. Quimby, why we named the cat Picky. She and Mr. Quimby looked at one another and only partly suppressed their laugh. The girls exchanged sulky glances. Parents should not be laughing at their children. Beezus silently cleared the table. Mrs. Quimby served applesauce and oatmeal cookies, while Mr. Quimby talked about his work as Santa's little helper in the frozen food warehouse. He told how snow actually fell inside the warehouse door when someone opened it and let the warm air in. He told about a man who had to break icicles off his mustache when he left the warehouse. It was so cold in there. Snow indoors? Icicles on a mustache? Ramona was full of questions that she would not let herself ask. Maybe working as Santa's little helper wasn't as much fun as she thought it was. I'll tell you what, said Mr. Quimby to Mrs. Quimby when the last cookie crumb had been eaten. You need a rest. Tomorrow, the girls can cook dinner, and you take it easy. Oh, that's a good idea, Mrs. Quimby said. Sometimes I do get tired of cooking. But I'm supposed to go to Mary Jane's tomorrow, protested Beezus. Well, call her up and tell her you can't come. Mr. Quimby was both cheerful and heartless. That's not fair, said Beezus. Tell me why it isn't fair, said Mr. Quimby. Beezus had no answer. Ramona understood that their plight was serious. When their father behaved this way, he never changed his mind. But I don't know how to cook, Ramona protested, except Jell-O and French toast. Nonsense, said Mrs. Quimby. You're in 3rd grade and you can read, and anyone who can read can cook. What are we going to cook? Beezus had to accept the fact that she and Ramona had no way out now. We'll cook the same things I cook, said her mother. Whatever I bought on special that you can find in the refrigerator. And cornbread, Mr. Quimby, his face serious, but his eyes looked amused, said, I expect to be served cornbread. Well, that evening, after the dishes had been put away, Picky was polishing gravy from his whiskers and their parents were watching the evening news on television. Ramona marched into Beezus' room and shut the door. This is all your fault, she exclaimed to her sister, who was lying in the bed with a book. Why didn't you just keep still? It is just as much your fault, said Beezus. You and your yuck. Both girls recognized nothing was going to be gained over arguing and blaming. But you like to cook, said Ramona. And you like to make Jell-O and French toast, said Beezus. The sisters looked at one another. What had gone wrong? Why didn't they want to prepare dinner? I think they're mean, said Ramona. They're punishing us, said Beezus. That's what they're doing. The sisters scowled. They liked to cook, but they did not like to use it as a punishment. They sat in silence, thinking cross thoughts about their parents. Especially their parents who were unfair, unkind, and did not appreciate what nice daughters they had. Lots of parents would be happy to have nice daughters like Beezus and Ramona. If I ever have a little girl, I will never make her eat tongue, said Ramona. I will only give her good things to eat, like stuffed olives and whipped cream. Me too, said Beezus. I wonder what there is out there for us to cook. Let's go look in the refrigerator, said Ramona. Beezus objected. What if they hear us opening the refrigerator? Mom and Dad will think we're hungry, and then we're going to get a lecture on not eating our dinner. But I am hungry, said Ramona, although she did understand the truth of Beezus' words. Oh well, she wouldn't actually starve to death before breakfast. She found herself thinking about French toast, golden with egg under a snowfall of powdered sugar. Maybe, Beezus was thoughtful, maybe if we're extra good, they'll forget about the whole thing. Ramona now felt sad as well as angry. Here she'd worked so hard to do her part by getting along at the Kemps, and now her family was not pulling together. Something had gone wrong. Beezus was probably right. The only way to escape punishment was to try to be extra good. Okay, Ramona agreed, but her voice was gloomy. What a dismal thought, being extra good. But it was better than allowing their parents to punish them. Ramona went to her own room where she curled up in bed with a book. She wished something nice would happen to her mother and father, something that would help them forget about the scene at the dinner table. She wished her father would succeed in drawing the perfect foot, the sort of foot that his teacher would want to hang in the front of the room, above the middle of the blackboard. Maybe a perfect foot would make her father happy. And her mother? Maybe if Ramona could forgive her for not boiling the egg, she would be happy. In her heart, Ramona had forgiven her, and she was sorry that she'd been so cross with her mother. She longed to go and tell her, but now she could not when she was being punished. And that is the end of chapter 4. So, poor Ramona Beezus, although I have to tell you, I do not think I could eat tongue. So I know a lot of people do, and I am sure it's a perfectly terrific thing, but in my family, I was known as a picky eater. They probably could have called me picky too. So I would have probably been doing the same thing. My nose would have turned up. I would have like scraped my gravy off to look at it and gone. So anyway, we'll see what happens to the girls tomorrow. Now they are stuck cooking dinner. They're going to try to think of a way to make their parents forget about it, so maybe they won't have to cook dinner. So who knows, with Ramona, you can never tell what's going to happen next. That's one of the best things. Okay, have a super great day. Make sure you're reading on your own. Get your books out and read. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.